It sounds like the setup for a bad joke or, a really bizarre urban legend. You pick up a copy of Newspost 7, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is a Japanese tabloid. It's usually famous for things like celebrity cheating scandals, guides to cheap restaurants, even literal ghost stories. So you're expecting to read about, I don't know, an actor's secret affair, maybe a restaurant review. But instead, nestled right there among all the gossip, you find what is basically a geopolitical bomb just ticking away. The headline isn't about a pop star. It's a very specific, very high-stakes leak. It's claiming that Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi is planning to visit the controversial Yasukuni Shrine in just a few weeks, on December 26th. And my first reaction, honestly, was just to dismiss it. I mean, why would a world leader telegraph a diplomatic crisis in a magazine that's known for entertainment fluff? It just seemed absurd, treating a gossip rag as a source for actual national security intelligence. But then you start to dig a little deeper. You look into the shadow world of Tokyo's Ryotai politics, and the absurdity just it vanishes, and it's replaced by something much, much colder.
Right, and Ryoti politics is a key concept here. We're talking about the backroom dealings, the real conversations that happen in high-end traditional restaurants, far away from any official record.
It's where the real power is brokered. And in that world, there's this fascinating, almost cynical mechanism at play. High-ranking political aides will deliberately feed these huge, dangerous trial balloons to the tabloids first.
It's a calculated test, that's all it is.
Exactly, a trial balloon. They're using a magazine known for urban legends to see if the world, and by the world they mean Beijing, Seoul, and Washington, if the world screams or if it just shrugs before the prime minister actually makes her move.
It's risk assessment disguised as celebrity gossip.
And what really struck me wasn't just how reckless the plan was, but the specific choice of that date, December 26th. That is not a random day on the calendar.
Not at all. It's a deliberate historical echo.
It's an echo of Shinzo Abe. He made a similar controversial visit on that exact date back in 2013, and it set off a diplomatic firestorm. So this signal, it suggests that this tabloid gossip is actually more like a verified roadmap for a major escalation that it could drag the entire region into conflict. And that's the atmosphere we are stepping into for this deep dive. It's an environment of deliberate brinkmanship, but also one of really urgent strategic realignment. So the real mission here is to look past all that political theater and explain this seismic, decades-defining change that's happening just beneath the surface. We're going to break down how Japan's response to this rapidly deteriorating security environment, all encapsulated in the new national security strategy, the national defense strategy, and the massive defense buildup program, how all of this is fundamentally repositioning Japan as a proactive military power.
We're talking about things like Counterstrike capabilities, an end to decades of self-imposed restrictions, and as you said, budget increases that are truly, truly unprecedented.
That narrative introduction really captures the tension perfectly. But we need to understand that this pivot, it's a pivot away from a post-World War II defense posture that's existed, for the most part, since the 1970s. This isn't just a political impulse.
No, not at all. It's born of a cold, calculated assessment of risk. In fact, Japan's defense planners now explicitly call this a new era of crisis.
Okay, so let's unpack that, this era of upheavals. If this passive posture was maintained for nearly 50 years, what was the fundamental change in the international system that finally forced Japan's hand? Was it one single event or more of a confluence of pressures?
It was definitely a confluence, but one with a very clear anchor point: the challenge of unilateral changes to the status quo by force. The documents themselves are crystal clear on this. They state that the international community is facing its greatest trial since World War II.
That's strong language. That's not hyperbole.
No, and it's rooted in very tangible violations of the existing international order. The most notable one, of course, is Russia's aggression against Ukraine. I mean, think about the implications of that for a moment. You have a permanent member of the UN Security Council launching a full-scale invasion, completely disregarding international law, and repeatedly making threats involving nuclear weapons.
And for Japan, that's not some distant war in Europe.
Exactly. It's a template for potential action in Asia. If the principle of territorial integrity can be violated so brazenly in Ukraine, where you see nuclear blackmail being employed, the Japanese government recognizes that the implications for, say, Taiwan or the East China Sea are profound and immediate. That lesson, the lesson that a great power can just decide to ignore foundational international norms. That's what really triggered this entire strategic shift.
So the goal isn't necessarily to become an offensive military power, which is, of course, constrained by their constitution. It's more about fundamentally shifting the strategic calculus for any potential adversaries, basically making the cost of aggression just too high to even think about.
Precisely. Japan is very clear that it maintains its identity as a peace-loving nation. It's still committed to diplomacy, to the rule of law, peaceful dispute settlement. That part is unwavering. However, the new strategies lay out this essential dual mandate. The first part is to defend our country by ourselves, and the second is to increase deterrence. The core objective is simple, but for Japan, it's revolutionary. They need to make an adversary realize that attacking Japan will not achieve its goals.
And the tangible manifestation of that intent arrived in December of 2022. That's when they adopted the three foundational strategies we mentioned. The National Security Strategy, the NSS, which sets the overarching policy.
Then you have the National Defense Strategy, the NDS, which details the military means to achieve that policy.
And finally, the Defense Buildup Program, or DBP, which is essentially the financial roadmap. And this whole package, this triplet, it officially replaces the old National Defense Program guidelines framework that they'd been using since 1976.
Yes, and while the strategic documents are obviously important, the ultimate measure of their commitment, as you said, is the budget. The financial numbers here are just staggering. It shows this is a long-term, whole-of-government undertaking that goes way beyond any single annual political cycle.
And what's the big target number?
The big target is to reach a budget level equivalent to 2% of its GDP by the fiscal year 2027.
2%.
2%. That translates to approximately 11 trillion yen annually.
Okay, let's just ground that number for a second. 11 trillion yen. That is an enormous sum of money. It would radically alter Japan's ranking in global defense spending.
It absolutely does. For context, that 2% goal is the NATO standard. It's a standard that Japan had historically and deliberately avoided for decades.
Right.
So achieving that by 2027 catapults Japan into being the third largest defense spender in the world, right behind the United States and China. I mean, this move signals, louder than any diplomatic statement could, a decisive break from those post-war constraints.
And that 2% goal is supported by the specific 5-year defense buildup program. What does that raw investment look like over the next 5 years?
The DBP for fiscal years 2023 through 2027 commits a massive 43.5 trillion yen in necessary expenditure.
Yeah.
This is perhaps the most shocking figure of all.
Wow. How does that compare to the previous plan?
Well, if you look at the previous 5-year plan, the planned expenditure was 17.2 trillion yen.
So it's more than double.
It's more than double. It's 153% increase. We are talking about an unprecedented financial escalation in Japan's defense commitment since the Second World War. It just underscores the sheer urgency with which Tokyo views the threats from its neighbors and the political will they've found to overcome decades of spending reluctance.
That transition point, I mean, the sheer weight of that financial commitment, it takes us directly into the justification for this massive shift. Because it's not just a general feeling of instability, is it? It's a specific, quantified analysis of the threats right on Japan's doorstep.
Absolutely. The strategy documents make it clear they're focused intensely on capability, not just on trying to guess murky intent.
Which makes sense. Intent can change overnight.
Exactly. The defense planners scrutinized the rising capabilities, not just the rhetoric, of China, North Korea, and Russia. And they specifically noted the relentless speed of their military modernization over the last decade. This is the key. Japan is adapting its defense to what its adversaries can do, not just what they say they will do.
Okay, so let's start with the China challenge, because the numbers here, they just demonstrate this exponential growth, both in quantity and quality. It demanded a fundamental recalculation in Tokyo.
Where China is extensively and rapidly enhancing everything. Its naval, air, nuclear, and missile forces are all being modernized, and it's all supported by a continuously high defense budget that now just dwarfs Japan's. This scale of modernization is the primary driver of regional instability.
And what about the nuclear side of things?
We have hard forecasts that China may possess 1,500 nuclear warheads by 2035.
1,500. That is a staggering figure. What does that kind of transition from its sort of minimum deterrent to a massive nuclear arsenal, what does that mean for Japan, which operates under the U.S. extended nuclear umbrella?
It means China has emerged as a major nuclear power, one that's capable of challenging the credibility of the U.S. nuclear deterrent itself. For Japan, it adds this whole new layer of existential uncertainty. It shifts the entire regional dynamic from simple deterrence to what experts often call strategic stability, where the risk of any conflict escalating to the nuclear level becomes significantly higher.
So Japan now has to worry not just about conventional attacks,
Yes.
but also about the potential for limited nuclear use, or even just strategic coercion. The threat is much more complex now.
And if we focus on the conventional forces, just comparing the baseline from 2012 to today really illustrates the scale of this naval and air expansion.
It really does. In just one decade, from 2012 to 2022, China increased its number of modern destroyers and frigates by approximately 1.6 times.
Its fleet of modern submarines increased by about 1.5 times. And what's even more striking is the air power growth. Their fourth-generation fighters increased by approximately 2.8 times.
So they're not just building more, they're building better.
They're building better and faster. This creates a massive quantitative edge, which Japan now has to counter with qualitative superiority and asymmetric advantages. And that's why you see the later focus in the DBP on things like standoff missiles and cyber warfare.
And it's not just about accumulating hardware, is it? It's also about this proactive maritime assertiveness, creating what they call fates accomplice. They are literally changing the map physically and legally.
That's correct. You just have to look at the South China Sea. Since 2014, China has engaged in this large-scale rapid land reclamation and infrastructure development. They've essentially militarized artificial islands. They've maintained de facto control over the Scarborough Shoal since 2012.
These are unilateral changes to the status quo.
Achieved by force or the threat of force. And that sets dangerous precedents. And then closer to Japan, around the Senkaku Islands, we see this unrelenting pressure. Frequent intrusions by China Coast Guard vessels, some of which have been equipped with gun-like armaments since 2015. Japan is facing this constant low-level harassment that's designed to establish administrative control through just being there all the time.
And the activities around Taiwan are now directly impacting Japan's own territorial security. That missile incident in August 2022 was a real shockwave.
It was the moment the threat stopped being theoretical and became very, very real. During those intensified military activities around Taiwan, 5 Chinese ballistic missiles landed directly within Japan's exclusive economic zone, the EEZ.
5 of them.
5. Imagine the shock in Tokyo. It doesn't matter where they were aimed. This was a clear, intentional violation of international norms and Japan's own maritime space. It proved that any major conflict over Taiwan would immediately spill over right onto Japan's doorstep.
And the volume of air activity has also ramped up.
Oh, dramatically. The number of Chinese aircraft entering Taiwan's airspace nearly doubled. It jumped from 972 in 2021 to 1,733 in 2022. This kind of operational tempo is designed to be exhausting for both Taiwanese and Japanese air defenses.
And they have carriers now, too.
Yes, we also saw the first confirmation of China's second aircraft carrier, the Shandong, entering the Pacific in 2023. And it conducted over 600 takeoffs and landings. These actions extend China's military footprint well beyond the so-called First Island chain, intensifying military pressure across the entire region that surrounds Japan.
So that gives a very clear picture of the scale and speed of the China challenge. Let's pivot slightly to the North Korean threat, which Japan defines in its documents as even more grave and imminent.
Right.
What makes the North Korean challenge strategically different? Is it more about the sheer imminence and the technological difficulty of interception rather than just quantitative scale?
That's a perfect way to differentiate it. North Korea's threat profile has changed dramatically, mainly because of the unprecedented frequency of its missile launches and its rapid technological advancements.
How much has it increased?
If you compare the period from 1998 to 2012 with the period from 2013 to 2022, the number of ballistic missiles they have launched, including ones that have flown right over Japan, has increased by approximately 8.4 times. It's the sheer saturation of these launches that has defense planners so worried.
And what are the technological shifts that are most worrying to Japan's defense planners? The ones that really challenge their existing defense networks?
Well, they cite 3 major advancements that specifically challenge the missile defense architecture Japan has spent the last 2 decades building. First is the pursuit of solid-fueled missiles.
And solid fuel is dangerous because it's fast.
It's fast and it's easy to hide. Solid fuel means the missiles can be stored ready to fire for long periods and launched almost instantly from concealed locations. It drastically reduces any warning time.
Okay, what's the second one?
The second is the development of ballistic missiles with irregular trajectories. Now, irregular trajectories sounds very clinical, But what it actually means is a shift from a predictable parabolic arc, which traditional missile defense systems, like Aegis, are designed to intercept to maneuvers that almost seem to defy physics.
Which gives them far less time to react.
Far less time. And it seriously complicates the interception algorithms.
Which brings us to the third point, which sounds almost like science fiction.
Yeah.
Hypersonic gliding warheads.
These are the game changers. The development of what they call hypersonic gliding flight warheads is explicitly designed to breach existing missile defense networks by making interception extremely difficult. They are highly maneuverable, they travel at extremely high speeds, and they can change course dramatically during their glide phase. They can evade predictable missile defense shields. This capability is what makes the threat so grave and imminent.
And of course, there's the nuclear stockpile itself, which has grown right alongside these new delivery systems.
Yes, the estimated number of nuclear warheads North Korea possesses has increased significantly, from an estimate of maybe 6 to 8 warheads before 2012 to approximately 20 by 2022. And this quantitative increase, combined with a qualitative improvement in their delivery systems platforms that allow launches from submarines or even trains, presents a truly grave threat.
It means they have a survivable and diversified nuclear capability aimed right at Japan.
Precisely.
Finally, in this threat landscape, we can't ignore the Russia factor, especially since the invasion of Ukraine altered the entire global strategic landscape. How does Japan view Russia's military posture and its coordination with China in the Far East?
Japan is observing that strategic coordination between Russia and China very, very closely. While Russia's conventional forces have sustained some serious losses in the West, they're still promoting equipment modernization and reinforcing armaments in Japan's northern territories, which include the Kuril Islands.
So the threat from the north hasn't diminished?
Not at all. It shows that despite the manpower and material drain from the war in Ukraine, the strategic threat to Japan from that direction remains.
And can you give us some specifics on the deployments in the Far East that directly threaten Japan?
Sure. Since 2016, Russia has been deploying advanced missile systems to the disputed islands. They deployed the potent Bastion surface-to-ship missiles, which have a 300-kilometer range, to Itorofu Island, and the Ball missiles, with a 130-kilometer range, to Kunishiri Island.
So they're establishing a serious anti-access area denial bubble right on Japan's northern flank.
A formidable one. And then in 2018, Su-35S fighters were deployed to Itorofu, reinforcing their air presence in the region.
And the coordination with China, Tokyo sees that as an explicit demonstration of force?
Absolutely. The repeated joint bomber flights and vessel navigations by Russia and China, sometimes navigating through sensitive areas like the Tsugaru Strait, are viewed by Japan not as routine exercises, but as clear strategic coordination intended to demonstrate force against Japan and the wider region.
So this deepening military tie-up between two major nuclear powers facing Japan is a major security concern.
It's a huge concern, and it contributed directly to the strategic pivot we see in these new documents. It forces Japan to plan for a potential two-front conflict, or at the very least, a highly coordinated joint effort from its neighbors.
So the table is set, a geopolitical environment of, maximum crisis. It's defined by the rapid military expansion of China, the technological leaps by North Korea, and the coordinated aggression of Russia. The resulting National Defense Strategy, the NDS, had to outline a response that fundamentally changed Japan's defense doctrine.
Yes. The NDS provides the blueprint for this new architecture, and it moves away from those old post-war constraints. As we discussed, it focuses intensely on opponent capabilities, acknowledging that trying to gauge intent is just fraught with risk. The threat materializes when the capability to inflict harm exists, regardless of whether we can accurately assess their political will at any given moment.
And the NDS establishes 3 clear defense objectives to guide this new approach. Can we recap those strategic goals?
Of course. The objectives are sequential and they're mutually reinforcing. The first is to shape the environment. Japan must use diplomacy, engagement, and deterrence to discourage any unilateral changes to the status quo by force.
So, prevent the fight from starting.
Exactly. The second objective is to deter and respond. This means collaborating with allies and partners, principally the United States, to swiftly bring a situation under control if an attempt to change the status quo begins.
And the third and most critical objective?
The third is to defeat the invasion. If deterrence fails and an invasion occurs, Japan takes primary responsibility. It will secure an asymmetric advantage across different domains, meaning focusing on areas where the opponent is weak, and its goal is to crush the opponent's will to invade.
And it's within that third objective, defeat the invasion, that the NDS introduces the capability that has caused the most controversy and really represents the largest policy shift in decades: Counterstrike.
This is the revolution. This is truly it. The NDS officially adopts the policy for possessing counterstrike capabilities. This fundamentally changes Japan's defense-only posture, what's often referred to as bujei, or exclusive self-defense.
So the shift means Japan is now investing in the ability to project force deep into an adversary's territory if it's attacked.
Oh, right.
This decision, it inevitably raises critical questions about escalation risk and constitutional limits. So how exactly is this counterstrike capability defined to keep it within Japan's constitutional constraints on offensive warfare?
The definition is extremely meticulous and it's legally constrained. These are capabilities that, in the event of a missile attack by an opponent, enable Japan to mount effective counterstrikes against the opponent's territory.
Specifically at launch sites.
Specifically at things like launch sites or command and control nodes, with the goal of preventing further attacks. And this is done while simultaneously defending with their existing missile defense network. It's explicitly positioned as a measure for self-defense, limited to the minimum required level to prevent an invasion. It is not about launching a first strike.
So the strategic messaging is essentially, if you fire at us, we will destroy the source of your attack, guaranteeing that your attack will fail. That is a massive deterrent that Tokyo just did not possess before.
Exactly. It's meant to make the opponent realize that launching a missile attack will not achieve their goals, because Japan now has the ability to hit back effectively at the source of the attack, making the whole operation self-defeating for the aggressor. That capability to hit back is what constitutes credible deterrence in this new era of crisis.
And beyond just massive missile attacks, the new NDS also details the need to address these emerging new ways of warfare. The modern battlefield is multi-domain.
Yes, modern conflict is far more complex than conventional battles. The NDS identifies 3 key defense challenges that have to be addressed immediately. The first one is the challenge of massive missile attacks. This means not just intercepting incoming missiles and trying to constrain enemy launches, but also, crucially, minimizing damage and quickly restoring affected facilities like runways if missiles do get through. Resilience is now built directly into the definition of defense.
What about asymmetric threats, particularly in these new realms of conflict like space and cyber?
That's the second challenge: asymmetric attacks via new domains. This includes space, where you have threats like anti-satellite missiles, laser weapons, jamming weapons. Then you have cyber attacks aimed at critical infrastructure, the electromagnetic spectrum, and increasingly the use of unmanned vehicles. Building future defense capabilities hinges on effectively integrating and responding across all 5 domains: ground, air, sea, space, and cyber EMS, to secure that asymmetric advantage.
And finally, the NDS emphasizes winning the information battle, what we now call hybrid warfare.
Hybrid warfare, which includes information warfare and the spread of disinformation, is seen as a critical component of modern conflict. It often precedes any kinetic action. So Japan has to get better at promptly detecting suspicious signs, quickly deploying self-defense force units ahead of opponents, and winning the information war to prevent public confusion.
So that means things like fact-checking disinformation.
It means fact-checking, disseminating accurate information promptly and appropriately, and recognizing the cognitive dimension of warfare. The fight for the minds of the public can be just as crucial as the kinetic fight on the battlefield.
So the strategy of the NDS, it demands that Japan acquire the ability to hit back and to dominate in these 5 domains. This takes us directly to that enormous price tag, the 43.5 trillion yen defense buildup program, structured across 7 key pillars of capability. This is where the paper promises become reality.
The DBP is the financial roadmap for the NDS. The Ministry of Defense prioritized 2 main things. First, maximizing the effective use of their current equipment by improving operational rates and fixing long-standing logistics issues. And second, strengthening future core capabilities. And those future capabilities are primarily standoff defense and unmanned assets, which represent the biggest technological leaps.
Okay, let's get into the weeds of these 7 pillars. Let's start with Pillar 1, which seems to be the most critical one for the new counterstrike capability: standoff defense.
Pillar 1 commits approximately 5 trillion yen to standoff defense capabilities. This is where you see the highest budget increase multiplier, a whopping 25 times increase from the previous 5-year plan.
25 times.
25. This massive acceleration just reflects the urgency of acquiring that long-range strike capability. The goal is simple: respond to opposing forces from a safe distance, operating outside of the threat zone established by adversaries, which protects SDF personnel in the process.
And what specific weapons systems are they prioritizing here to build this long-range capability? And why do they need such a diverse array of them?
Well, the acquisitions include the highly controversial Tomahawk missiles from the U.S. That gives them an immediate, proven, long-range strike capability that's capable of reaching deep into potential adversary territory.
So that's the off-the-shelf solution.
Right. They're also building up their existing stocks of standoff missiles like the JSM, the Joint Strike Missile, and the JASSM, which can be launched from their F-35 fighters.
But they're also developing their own systems.
Yes, and this is perhaps more strategically important in the long run. They're investing heavily in domestic research and development of upgraded Type 12 surface-to-ship missiles, hypervelocity gliding projectiles, and advanced hypersonic missiles.
And the diversity is about redundancy.
It's about redundancy and survivability. You have the Type 12 for saturation strikes, the Tomahawk for volume and proven effectiveness, and then the hypervelocity and hypersonic missiles are designed to bypass the next generation of defenses. This entire pillar is the heart of Japan's new deterrent posture.
Okay, let's move to Pillar 2. Integrated Air and Missile Defense, or IAMD. This is about bolstering the defensive shield against those unpredictable missile threats we were just talking about.
This is a continuation of existing efforts, but with much more sophistication and a bigger budget, around 3 trillion yen. The focus is on tackling these increasingly diverse and complicated airborne threats, especially ballistic and cruise missiles.
And how are they doing that?
This involves increasing the number of their Aegis-equipped destroyers from 6 to 8 and deploying the latest PAC-3 MSE surface-to-air guided missiles. They are also jointly developing the advanced SM-3 Block IIA missile with the U.S., which is designed to intercept missiles outside the atmosphere.
Now, Pillar 3, unmanned defense capabilities. This also sees a massive investment boost, a tenfold increase compared to the previous plan.
Yes, the investment here is about 1 trillion yen. The military has learned from conflicts like the one in Ukraine that unmanned assets are absolutely essential, both for intelligence gathering and for reducing the risk to human personnel in high-threat areas. The primary objective is to enhance intelligence gathering and combat support capabilities using these assets.
So what are they actually buying?
This includes the acquisition of Global Hawk unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. They're going from 0 to 2 aircraft, which provides wide area, high-altitude surveillance, and also the operation of long-term operational unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs.
UUVs are critical for monitoring submarines, right?
They're crucial for monitoring adversary submarine movements and for protecting Japan's extensive underwater infrastructure, like communication cables. They've also established a new reconnaissance group to specialize in processing all the data that these new assets will be generating.
And these unmanned systems are intrinsically linked to Pillar 4, cross-domain operation capabilities, which is where they're allocating a stunning 8 trillion yen. This is about securing that asymmetric advantage you mentioned.
That's exactly right. This pillar is all about fusing their capabilities, space, cyber, the electromagnetic spectrum with the traditional ground, maritime, and air forces. The goal isn't just to be present in these new domains, but to dominate them, to ensure that all Japanese forces have a decisive asymmetric advantage in any conflict.
How does that domination translate into a real tactical advantage on the ground?
Well, think of it this way. Dominance in the electromagnetic spectrum means you can blind enemy sensors, you can jam their communication networks, and you can ensure your own missiles reach their targets unimpeded.
And in the cyber realm.
In the cyber realm, specific institutional investments include the establishment of the Air Self-Defense Force Space Operations Group and the Joint Self-Defense Force Cyber Defense Command, both founded in 2022. The Space Group monitors enemy satellite activities and space debris, while the Cyber Command ensures the integrity of Japan's own networks and critical infrastructure. They're also developing standoff electronic warfare aircrafts and leveraging AI for things like image recognition, using algorithms to process the massive amounts of data flowing from global hawks and satellites much faster than any human could.
Okay, so Pillar 5 addresses the critical element of leadership and information flow, command and control and intelligence functions. All this fancy hardware means nothing if the generals can't talk to each other quickly and securely.
Exactly. This is critical for quick, accurate decision-making in a crisis, which is essential to winning information warfare. The 1 trillion yen investment here includes launching their own X-band defense communication satellites, the Kirameki 1 and 2, to strengthen their communication systems and ensure seamless, continuous intelligence gathering. The speed of decision-making is often the defining factor in a modern conflict, and this investment ensures robust, high-bandwidth communications that are secure from attack.
Then we have Pillar 6, mobile deployment capabilities and civil protection. This seems to focus heavily on the geographical challenge of defending Japan's remote island chain, especially in the sensitive southwest region.
Yes, this 2 trillion yen commitment is all about enhancing rapid maneuverability and deployment, especially to that southwestern region, which had historically been under-defended. Japan has thousands of islands, and protecting them requires rapid, flexible logistics. This capability is the essential link between Okinawa and a potential Taiwan contingency.
And this is where we see the acquisition of specific, specialized transport assets. Why the V-22 Ospreys and the C-2 transport aircraft?
The V-22 Ospreys, they're going from 0 to 13 aircraft, are vital because they combine the speed of an airplane with the ability to take off and land like a helicopter. This allows them to quickly ferry troops and supplies across wide stretches of ocean to islands that don't have functional runways. The C-2 transport aircraft provides the bulk list needed for heavier equipment.
And they're putting troops on those islands as well.
Yes, they established the GSDF Amphibious Rapid Deployment Brigade and are deploying area security force units to remote islands like Yonaguni-jima and Ishigaki-jima. These assets are crucial for rapidly reinforcing or evacuating personnel from those far-flung islands during a crisis.
And finally, Pillar 7, sustainability and resiliency. We sort of glossed over this before, but you identified it as maybe the most important element for long-term deterrence. It addresses these long-standing, unglamorous, but absolutely critical logistical failures.
This is a major insight, and it's so important. Modern deterrence is not just about having a shiny new missile. It's about having the fuel, the parts, and the ammunition to keep that missile firing. They dedicated 2 trillion yen specifically to resolve the long-standing shortage of ammunition and guided missiles.
They didn't have enough before.
Historically, Japan maintained a minimal reserve, forcing them to rely almost entirely on the U.S. in any kind of prolonged conflict. This new fun part of a larger 5 trillion yen allocation for ammunition ensures Japan can sustain combat operations independently for a meaningful period of time.
And beyond ammunition, the resiliency of the infrastructure itself is paramount.
Yes. 4 trillion yen is dedicated to improving facility resiliency. The current situation is precarious. Only about 20% of major SDF facilities have proper protection performance.
20%, that's it.
That's it. The long-term goal is for 100% of major facilities to have both protection and earthquake resistance within roughly 10 years. This involves structurally reinforcing buildings and, crucially, moving major command headquarters underground. This is a direct lesson learned from assessing modern warfare. Key command nodes are always the first targets. By moving underground, Japan ensures continuity of command even under a sustained attack.
So the transition from a passive defense-only posture to one with counterstrike capability and a 43.5 trillion yen investment is clearly about Japan strengthening its own architecture. But the defense strategy acknowledges that no single country can secure its safety alone. And that leads us to the crucial component, the system of alliances and partnerships that creates collective deterrence.
The foundation remains the Japan-U.S. alliance. The NDS defines it as the cornerstone for Japan's security, and it's now stronger than ever in terms of deterrence and response capabilities. It is the absolute bedrock upon which this entire new defense architecture rests.
And there have been significant advancements in that alliance over the last decade, particularly regarding the scope of the Security Treaty Article V, which defines when an armed attack triggers a mutual defense commitment.
Absolutely. The Japan-U.S. 2+2 meetings confirmed a monumental policy evolution. Originally, the treaty was conceived for traditional land, air, and sea conflict, but now it's been modernized. They confirmed that an attack in the cyber domain can now constitute an armed attack under Article V.
And in space as well.
Even more recently, they confirmed that an attack in space could also lead to the invocation of Article V.
That is enormous. It means that if critical Japanese infrastructure is crippled by a state-sponsored cyber attack, or if a Japanese satellite is destroyed in orbit, the U.S. commitment to mutual defense is potentially triggered. What's the risk-benefit assessment for linking a treaty written for tanks and ships to the digital or orbital realm?
The benefit is expanded deterrence in the very areas where China and Russia have invested heavily in asymmetric capabilities. Japan recognized that the first shots of a modern conflict would likely be fired in space or cyber. So by extending Article V, they signal to adversaries that an attack in these domains is viewed with the same gravity as a traditional military attack.
And the risk?
The risk, of course, is that it increases the points of friction and the speed at which a low-level digital attack could escalate into a major kinetic confrontation involving the United States.
And beyond these legal definitions, how has the actual operational integration between the two forces changed?
It has increased dramatically. It's moved beyond simple diplomatic assurances to deep operational integration. The number of bilateral exercises between Japan and the U.S. jumped from just 24 in fiscal year 2013 to 108 in fiscal year 2022.
So more than 4 times as many.
Exactly. They are deepening cooperation on extended deterrence, including the credibility of nuclear deterrence, through active, deep bilateral discussions and ensuring logistic support. The goal is the seamless implementation of allied cross-domain operations and improving interoperability across all domains.
The strategies also stress that Japan is actively building multilateral networks far beyond its primary ally, reinforcing this free and open Indo-Pacific vision.
This expansion is fundamental. The objective is to reinforce collaboration with as many countries as possible. And the institutional expansion has been rapid. The number of countries with 2+2 ministerial frameworks, that's high-level defense and foreign policy coordination, has increased from 4 to 9. And defense equipment transfer agreements have grown from just 2 countries to 13.
Can you give us a concrete example of a non-U.S. collaboration that really highlights this new assertive internationalism?
A prime example is the joint development of the next-generation fighter aircraft by Japan, the United Kingdom, and Italy, which was initiated in 2022. This is a monumental technological collaboration. It's a shift away from the historical dependency on U.S. designs. It demonstrates Japan's commitment to building its own cutting-edge defense industrial capabilities while deepening security ties with major European NATO powers who share similar concerns about global security norms.
And they're doing more exercises with other partners, too.
Significantly more. Japan's participation in multilateral exercises rose from 19 in 2013 to 43 in 2022. And beyond direct military cooperation, Japan is leveraging its capabilities to assist partner countries through capacity-building projects. For example, they transferred air surveillance radar systems to the Philippines. This entire network is designed to shape the security environment and discourage unilateral changes to the status quo across the whole region. So we've observed the culmination of a decade of geopolitical pressure, and it's manifested in this monumental, decades-defining shift in Japan's defense architecture. This is a move from a strictly passive force, one defined by the constraints of the post-war era, to one that is actively designed for deterrence through the credible threat of counterstrike. The new strategies, the NSS, NDS, and DBP, are Japan's decisive answer to this new era of crisis. They reflect a grim reality that peace can't be secured just by wishing for it. It has to be defended through capability. And that defense buildup program, it's not just an increase in spending, it is a complete structural realignment across those 7 core pillars. It's quadrupling the budget allocation in key strategic areas like standoff capabilities and unmanned systems, and crucially, it's solving decades of domestic logistical issues: ammunition, equipment maintenance, facility resilience, moving command headquarters underground. This focus on the mundane, the logistics and sustainability of warfighting, is perhaps the most significant, though least discussed, element of Japan's new deterrent posture. This reinforcement, backed by the deepening Japan-U.S. alliance, which now covers threats in space and cyber, and the expansion of multilateral networks across the Indo-Pacific, fundamentally increases the cost and complexity of any unilateral change to the status quo by China, Russia, or North Korea. This new assertive security posture has effectively redrawn the strategic map of East Asia, defining Japan as a far more capable independent security actor than it has been in 80 years.